Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session. We will be getting started in just a minute. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. We will be getting started in just a minute. Feel free to set your chat to everyone and say your name and where you're joining from. All right, ready to get started? Okay. All right, so hello, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Billy Cotterman, and I'll be moderating this session. Before we get started, let's go over a few logistical items. This session is being recorded. Captions are available during this session by clicking on the Live CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Thank you to Javier Saavedra for providing these. Please use the Q&A feature for any presentation questions. You can choose to do this anonymously. There will be 10 to 15 minutes for the Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Please use the chat for general comments or technical issues. Adebola Fabiku will be monitoring the chat for any questions and comments. Adebola will also be adding some links to the chat. One is for collaborative resource sharing. If you think of a related reading, podcast, video, or something else, please share it with us in Calm's Resources Zotero or in the chat. The next link is our Conference Code of Conduct. So I am glad to welcome Roxane Pickens, who is the Community Engagement Librarian and Head of External Engagement at New York University Libraries. She holds a doctorate in American Studies with Literary and Cultural Studies scholarship that explores identity and festivity in Harlem Renaissance, Jazz Age literature, and expressive culture. She has also co-published on outreach and engagement practices at academic libraries, specifically co-locating academic support services, library support for ethnic studies programs, and anti-racist practices through common reading programs. Her current research and teaching interests include library outreach and engagement, interdisciplinary and cultural literacies in library settings, teaching with primary resources, diversity, equity, and inclusion in academic spaces, American studies, African American literature and culture, U.S. identity construction, and the rhetorical dimensions of ethnic, festive, expressive cultures. Today, our presentation is Emergent Strategy and Radical Library Management and Engagement. And now I will turn things over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy, for your warm opening and introduction. I feel a little bit random hearing all of those categories, but it's a little bit of who I am. So I hope that it transmits in a decent way to you. So thanks again, Billy, and to the coordinators of the CALM 2024 conference for the privilege of presenting to you today. What I'm hoping to do is to create a space for a different kind of conversation about library management and engagement. I may be sharing information that is already known and digested by some of you, especially folks who are connected to the recent call for book chapter proposals through Litwin Books and Library Juice Press on emergent strategies. So I will ask that you share your wisdom when we get to the discussion and Q&A. For everyone else, I would ask that you join me in curious and open exploration. So just to give you an overview of what we'll be talking about today, I'll have a brief introduction. We'll talk a little bit about emergent strategy as a concept, then shift to emergent strategy in library management as I've thought through these ideas. And then we'll think a little bit, look at a case study on emergent strategy and library engagement. And then I want to end up with some final considerations and then move us into open time for discussion and Q&A. And I have some prompts that I'll share on the screen to help us with that conversation. So as libraries seek to create more just, equitable, anti-racist, and decolonizing spaces and experiences on both sides of the desk and throughout the stacks, I want to acknowledge management's roots in a difficult past. Taking hold of that knowledge and creating something radically new and humane requires different frameworks and models of relationship and capacity building. Indeed, what would it look like if library work practices were informed by radical movement work? How might the praxis of social movement organizing help create libraries that are more deeply relational and transformational? This presentation, prompted by writer and social activist Adrienne Marines Brown's Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds, will explore how the concept of emergent strategy can offer new ways of engaging library workers and patrons, and in turn help shape new ways of being in community with each other. Please forgive me if this history and analysis are known, but I would like to trace my own thinking that led me to this presentation's focus. First, I took a moment to think through the foundations of this conference, which are clearly described on its website. Important for me was to think through the following quotes, which include the Conference on Academic Library Management strives to fill a gap in academic library professional development landscape by focusing on practical management skills and concrete practices that impact the day-to-day work of departments and units within academic libraries. And it was also moved by this. We acknowledge, it says, that our profession has a varied history with diversity, equity, and inclusion. CALM seeks to be an inclusive and welcoming space, which encourages diversity of ideas and thought. The focus of CALM, as well as many of its topics over the years, fall well within the areas of anti-racist, decolonial, and critical practices in libraries. And it appears to strive for library management skills acquisition in relational ways, ways that privilege our shared humanity as we endeavor to provide resources, services, and spaces for building knowledge and understanding. With that information and a curiosity about how alternative management practices might turn up in libraries, I found myself learning about an important bit of US business history from the 1700s. In her review of plantation account books from the late 18th century, US and West Indian slaveholders, Caitlin Rosenthal argues that the antecedents of scientific management strategies can be traced as effectively, if not more so, to these countries' system of enslavement as that history does to the Industrial Revolution. Quote, slaveholders built large and complex organizations, conducted productivity analysis akin to scientific management, and developed an array of ways to value and compare human capital. The limited rights and opportunities of the men, women, and children laboring beneath them facilitated these efforts. Put differently, slavery encouraged the development of sophisticated management practices. And this is a quote from historian Rosenthal, is a historian, Accounting for Slavery, Masters, and Management. Rosenthal goes on to outline key ways that control over people in plantation economies, meted out occasionally by benefits, but most routinely through violence, are linked to sophisticated accounting and management practices that are frequently denied presence in business histories, but which undergird rhetorical systems of productivity and progress. The grim quote that I could not bring myself to share on screen, but will say out loud, is this chilling summation from Rosenthal. To borrow from a 21st century business buzzword, the author notes, slavery and quantitative management were synergistic. Clearly, we want to hold this historical information and consider different models that link work and management activities to thoughtful, humane relationships for all involved. I pose to myself, if I, as a manager, am going to proceed from a stance of anti-racist and critical practice, then I have to acknowledge those historical links, refuse to continue that illusion, and seek alternative models of interaction within this position of employment. And thus, I asked myself, how do we move from maximizing productivity to actualizing the potential of right relationship, equitable engagements, and spaces for community and liberatory change, both within each other as co-workers and with our communities? What I found is the concept of emergent strategy, which I would suggest is an important model for shifting library management more fully into spaces of anti-racist and equitable practice. I found this concept through Adrienne Maree Brown's Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds, a creative nonfiction compilation of her own research, practice, and creative exploration of social movement facilitation. Published in 2017 and informed by her experiences with facilitation of Black Lives Matter groups and organizers, Emergent Strategy is a philosophical text that centers relationships between participants and borrows as much from ecological theory and practice as it does from organizational behavior and Black womanist pedagogies and inspirations. It is based on the concept of emergence, which she shares from Nick Oblensky, an organizational theorist, who defines the term as such, and you can see this quote on the left of the screen. Emergence is the way complex systems and patterns arise out of a multiplicity of relatively simple interactions. And that is from Oblensky's complex adaptive leadership text. For Brown and her Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute, which you can see on the right, emergent strategy is a humble philosophy and a way to acknowledge the real power of change. It speaks to practices, responses, visions, and plans that embrace complexity, interdependence, and transformation. This, of course, we can see very well in social movement contexts. And what I'd like to suggest is that we can reread these things in other contexts as well, particularly in libraries. The elements and principles of emergent strategy are relatively simple, though they can give way to a natural complexity. And what we have here on the screen is pulled from the Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute's website, giving an overview of two categories of ideas that are connected, interconnected, and overlap. And we'll talk about each category in turn. First, I want to identify the elements of emergent strategy as Brown outlines it. The elements are that emergent strategy is non-linear and iterative, fractal, adaptive, resilient, and transformative justice tied to those concepts, creates more possibilities, and focuses on interdependence and decentralization. Here, I can advance the slide so you can see that a little more closely. Um, there are attendant questions that go along with those elements, and we'll get into those questions as they apply to library management context in just a little bit. In addition to the elements, we have what they call our core principles to emergent strategy, which is an important foundation for us to kind of move through. And you want to think about all of this as a series of prompts to help with movement, again, coming out of movement work. The principles here are that change is constant, with the admonition to be like water. Small is good, small is all. The large is a reflection of the small. There is always enough time for the right work. Less prep, more presence. There is a conversation in the room that only these people at this moment can have. Find it. Never a failure, always a lesson. Trust the people. If you trust the people, they become trustworthy. What you pay attention to grows. And move at the speed of trust. Focus on critical connections more than critical mass. Build resilience by building relationships. I want to remind us that this is a philosophy that can be built into applicable moves, which is what I'd like to suggest in this next section. Now we're going to explore emergent strategy and library management, or the ways that I think we can mindfully put this philosophy to work, or at least ask it to help inform how we interact with our teams, departments, and constituent communities. So let's first take the elements of emergent strategy and see how they might be applied. So what we have here is a grid, again, of all of the key elements, and below them suggestions that I'm thinking will help us to understand a little better how we can move through. And my apologies if you heard that sharp beep. Fire alarm just went off at my place. All right, we'll just move through. So first, I want to focus on nonlinear and iterative strategy, which is to consider, how do I and we learn from this, whatever it is that we're doing? Within a library management context, you might consider this move to be an effort toward piloting and test work. That is, the library as co-laboratory, and our labor and labor relationships as co-laboratories, meaning that we're working in experimental ways and adjusting according to those results. And that means that we're moving, right? It's a way to move from this is how we've always done it, and we've already tried that, into new spaces of possibility. If we move over to the right, I'll go across to the right and then back down. To the right, we have fractal presence, which is to consider how we are at the small scale is how we are at a large scale. In this context, you want to think about how personal and departmental values and workflows inform larger collaborations and larger interactions. And I want to call out my colleagues at NYU Libraries here in terms of being just really impactful and impressive in terms of how they move with each other and inspire us beyond. And in particular, I'm thinking about my colleagues in reference services, in undergraduate and instruction services, and in our special collections, particularly the Tamament Wagner labor collections. These colleagues do an extraordinary job of working together in an emergent context, I think, and it's incredibly inspiring. Next, we have an adaptive response, which is to consider how we live and grow and stay purposeful in the face of constant change. And so here, the emphasis is on understanding your department mission and values and being able to align those departmental mission and values with the larger organization's values. So you're always wanting to take that time to suss out, what are we focusing on? What are our shared goals? And how do they connect with the larger organization? Next, we'll think about interdependence and decentralization, which is to consider our mutual resilience and shared leadership and vision. Here is a really important practice of assigning task leads based on capacity, being open to collaboration, more so than single independent work, um, providing skill support where needed. And you can do this through modeling, through tandem work together, or other types of professional development. One thing that I will recommend in thinking through being interdependent with your team is the need to modulate your inner micromanager. And remember that there are many, many paths to success. So we want to be open to difference and inclusion. This truly is the emergent quality. Next, we want to think through creating more possibilities, which is to consider where we move toward life, we shape tomorrow towards abundance. So we want to move in small moves with achievable progress. This is very linked to that iterative gesture of testing and retesting. Connected to the principle of small is all, and it is what we will scale, right? We'll scale the small and we'll scale capacity, and that's how we build more meaningful relationships that reach more people. The other thing that I want to think about in terms of creating possibilities is that we want to, at this moment, assume success, and success we define in conversation in relation to that larger organization. So dialogue is really key here too. Finally, I want to emphasize resilience and transformative justice as an emergent quality, which is to consider how we recover and transform again through change. This is why I think emergent strategy is such an effective and important tool in change management. It turns on open dialogue, careful listening, working across boundaries of difference, and providing more space for reflection after the work we do. So after action reviews, for example, can be a practical example of this. And actually providing a little bit of space for folks to voice their frustrations, to voice what is challenging for them, and to hold space for that toward redirection and progress. And so as a library manager, you're being asked to really create that nice space. And that is what builds resilience and keeps us in a transformative mode. Now, again, all of these strategies operate in tandem with their principles. And I'm going to suggest that the emergent strategy core principles can be recategorized into 3 areas for library work: ground, atmosphere, and movement. I believe that these categories can inform the how and why of our work. These are the same principles that I read out loud before, but I want to think about them here again in this categorical space where we understand what our foundation is, what the atmosphere is through which we move, and we carry all of that when we start to have these moments of mission creep, when we start to have moments of doubt, when we reach moments of frustration and challenge. And so these, again, are recommendations or sort of admonitions that help us and our coworkers in terms of mindset, in as much as it helps us to craft more careful strategies as we're moving through our work. So now I want to move into thinking about emergent strategy as it connects to library engagement. And in this instance, I'm going to provide a little short case study from my work at NYU Libraries. And I believe that this case study really emphasizes emergent strategies focus on interdependence, iteration, and creation. So the case study that we have here today to consider is an exhibition that was planned and implemented over the fall of 2022 and the spring of 2023. And I think that it's a really interesting example of emergent strategy. What we did at NYU Libraries was to coordinate an exhibition program that year around multiple aligned units on the topic of connecting climate crisis, art, technology, and action. And so we had a number of different steps that fed into this progress. The libraries hosted an exhibition by an outside, not outside the university, but outside the libraries by the Tisch School of the Arts program. This is not a drill program. And then we linked up with our Common Read program, NYU Reads, and also the Office of Sustainability, which was also launching a marquee program called NYU 2040 Now, which was focusing on the effort towards sustainability, the university being in a much more sustainable place by the year 2040. This is an example of what we might call scaffolded engagement, in that elements of connection with our audience built on each other. So it started with an exhibition in the fall from the Tisch School of the Arts. And then we added into that a creative workshop called Connecting Through Color with local artists who led our community, mostly students, through a workshop of creating their own works in conversation with both the exhibition that was on display at Both's Library, as well as in conversation with readings that they had done through a Common Read program. We then moved into encouraged the participants from that workshop to submit proposals, art proposals, during a call for proposals that we followed up with. And then we curated those proposals into printed matter that was added to the gallery, along with some of the select artworks from the previous semester's show. And then we further collaborated with the Office of Sustainability to profile some new student artists' work, both in the form of a site-specific installation and a display of student films that were collected and curated. So this was a really big project that a team of us worked on. We had units from across the library supporting us in this. In our external engagement department, we took the lead. And we also worked with partners outside of the university or outside of the libraries to put this together. And I think that it's a really rich example of those emergent strategy elements where it's iterative, it's building on different actions and activities. It focused on small projects that could then be pulled together to coalesce into a larger display, very much interdependent, many collaborations and partnerships, and it explored the possibilities. Much of the conversation that the artists and audience members who came to our openings and to the shows itself were encouraged really to think through strategies of hope, in as much as they were thinking through strategies of action as we move through this climate crisis. The final thing that I wanted to mention in terms of an ongoing presence of this exhibition is that we also produced an exhibition catalog in a manifold open source platform. And so that, and again, open source, open access materials, I think, are another example of emergent strategy at work. And so we were happy to be able to participate in that gesture as well. So what I want to suggest in closing this part of the presentation is that emergent strategy can be an important way of moving through library work, both with each other as colleagues and with our patron communities. In centering relationships over productivity and progress, it keeps our humanity at the forefront and allows us to more fully realize our value commitments as part of a broad institution dedicated to the maintenance and celebration of our cultures and the knowledge and wisdom therein. It also allows us to restore our focus on those who have been excluded and denied, bringing us closer to our goals of equity, justice, diversity, and inclusion. Here are some further recommendations for exploring and incorporating emergent strategy into your work contexts. And I'm going to use here the very first reference. As I was thinking through the totality of this presentation, I realized, oh, slow librarianship. Let slow librarianship set the pace for your work, right? Its depth, its thought, its intentional connections. Practice open communication, dialogue, and deep listening. Find your group's ground. That is, what are the foundational values and actions that inform your activities at the small? How do they connect at the large? Crowdsource definitions of success for you and your group. There is no single definition of success. You can define it and move toward that. Again, holding on to that iterative, creative process. Privilege, relationships, and reciprocity. It's not just a one-way activity. In my group, in my department, we've talked about how we're certainly doing an awful lot of outreach, but we want to do more in-reach. We want to be in conversation with our communities that allow us to learn how we can be of support. We can take that seat and listen and create the space or work together to create space for their expression and their participation, for all of our participation, really. The final thing I want to encourage through emergent strategy is the breath. Breathe. Breathe through the work, breathe through the relationships. Just breathe. All right, so I've talked a lot, and now we're at discussion and Q&A, and I want to open it up here. There is a conversation in the room that only we can have, so let's find it. Again, I want to remind that I am also and very much sit in a learning and practice space with these concepts. So to borrow from transcultural fusion dance scholar Donna Mejia, we'll fumble forward with these ideas together. To help, I want to present a few assessment prompts that were pulled from Adrienne Marie Brown's text. It's in her text. It's a great part of the book that can be used in a journal and or discussion format on your own or in groups. So I'll leave this slide up to help anchor, orient, and springboard our thoughts. What I want to do, just so that we have a record of it and read aloud, is the dimensions of these little assessments, these questions that you can ask yourself for these elements. So if we're thinking about our fractal strategy, can your group state your mission and vision, especially with commitment? Adaptation. How does your group respond to change? Interdependent. What happens to your group if you disappear? In a good way. Iteration or iterative. What ways of being and engaging, that is ease or overscheduling, you can use that as maybe your spectrum, that your group practices? How are you together? Creating. What are your group's unique gifts? And how does it hold complexity? And then finally, resilience and transformative justice. How does the group handle and move through conflict? Again, we'll leave these open, and I will turn it over to Billy to help us navigate our questions and comments, and let's go.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much, Roxanne. We're going to go ahead and take time for questions. Be sure to type your questions into the Q&A box and we'll answer as many as possible. I'm going to go by most upvotes. So if you have a question you really want to see answered, go ahead and upvote it. All right, so we have a question from an anonymous attendee. Do you have suggestions for how to implement this management model style within a very hierarchical, larger organization? How do we sell micromanagers on this?
That is an excellent question that I was definitely myself a little bit nervous about coming into a new organization. So I'm relatively new to the NYU University landscape or libraries landscape, came from another medium size in relation to NYU, it's medium size university. And I thought about this. This was an opportunity for me to make some changes, and I wanted to see how I could move with this. I was very concerned about the understanding the landscape where I was in, and so to that end, I would certainly at the beginning suggest, you're aware of, be aware of your context, right? But part of that awareness is looking, and I don't have better words for this, but part of that awareness is looking for the cracks. Hierarchies seem like they're incredibly strong structures and they function that way. But what is built can be deconstructed and can reveal with some careful observation places where you can make interventions. So the first thing is just like kind of be aware of the landscape and be alert to the opportunities. This is an exercise of opportunity finding. So the other thing that I would recommend is that within your department or your unit or how you're functioning, really thinking through the possibility that you can make some very small incremental changes, right? Like even within huge hierarchical structures. And in fact, that's actually a good counter to them, is sort of recognizing that in a way, they're sort of too big to notice everything. And so you might want to use that to your advantage. Like think about the smaller spaces where you can move with this, right? It's going to be small, slow change. And that's an important thing to get used to. The slowness is really key. In terms of selling micromanagers on a concept like this, I think the most effective thing that I have experienced with folks who are maybe a little too attentive, like thinking about where's micromanaging coming from, it's coming from a level of attention, right? Like over attention. And so if you can tend to that attention and then redirect, so that's a lot of it, is sort of like, okay, you know, um, here's how we can meet some of the needs stated by that person. And then here's where some space can, be opened up. I think it's a negotiation. I think it's a negotiation that's turned on some genuine listening and willing to compromise. And so this is where that admonition, be like water. It's the flexibility. Even micromanagers are not. I mean, they're not solid. The hierarchy is not solid. Be open to the possibilities that emerge.
Yeah, and there are a couple comments in the chat. It feels like micromanagement is often coming from fear and insecurity.
Absolutely. And I think if we are attentive to the emotional state that might be driving some of that. It might have some better, you might have some better opportunities to address that, right? Because again, if you center the fact that we're all humans, that manager is human too. And we can work together as humans to meet our needs.
Great. Next comment from an anonymous attendee. Can you give advice for helping staff embrace slowing down and being less productive? We have several staff members who really want to do more, and it puts so much pressure on our other staff. Leadership does not support this style of management and has tried to be clear about the values we'd like to embrace, but there is a lot of resistance from staff.
So that's a really excellent question to think about, helping folks slow down. The high drive toward over productivity that I've experienced, and I can only speak from my experience. And actually, I'm not even going to speak from the experience of the people I work with. I'm going to speak from my own experience. When I have been in that mode of trying to produce, I look at that. We were just talking about fear. I know that that is driven from a place of insecurity and anxiety. That's it. And so that's where the breath comes in. You take a beat, sit with that, right? Sit with that idea that I'm scared that if I don't do this, I'm going to be met with some really dire consequences. What's important to think about in that context is that really true? And the way to figure out the answer to that question, like take it from a sort of scientific standpoint. You have a research question. Is it true that I have to produce all of this stuff? And then find the people who can help you answer that question. More often than not, that opens up a dialogue that will present the relief that's needed. And so again, it's going to take the time. It takes the time to just like have people sit with where they are and how their position is connecting to how they show up in the workplace. How this impacts higher leadership is a different question that I definitely want to think through, and I don't have a glib, like easy answer to that, apart from the fact that it is negotiation. And if you are a manager who can advocate for your staff, that then becomes the work that you that's what you sit with. And then we think about, again, what are those opportunities for intervention?
Excellent. Next question. Can you speak more about less prep, more presence?
Ooh, that's a great one that I struggle with. I'm going to just say I struggle with because I overanalyze, I overthink, I ruminate. So I'm telling you all of my business. I am in my head a lot. And the emphasis in less prep, more presence is to be aware of that condition and to be in conversation with others. So this is a moment where you're connecting to your community, you're doing that check-in, you're trying to determine, hey, is this a stalling tactic? Am I stalling here, right? Like, am I doing this in a way that's preventing me from whatever the next step is on the project, whatever the next step is with the relationships, right? So that's one, it gives you that opportunity to talk. But one of the other important elements of less prep, more presence is just the recognition that we can make a mess. Emergent strategy is iterative, it's experimental, it allows for you to try and fail because no failure is the worst thing, right? Failure is a lesson, in fact. And all of the sort of trying to navigate the contingencies is really kind of speaking to the anxiety about this thing needs to be perfect. If you realize that nothing's perfect and this is iterative, and I'll have another chance to do a do-over, right? I'll have a chance to make a U-turn, right? Whatever, however you think that through, then you recognize, oh, okay, I just need to launch this. I need to get this going. I need to be here for this thing that has to happen, or be here for these people who need to connect with me. I'm not going to think it all the way through. We're going to fumble forward again. That Donna Mejia, the scholar, she's in Colorado, that she's given us that phrase of fumbling forward. We're going to do that work together. We're just going to work through. We're not going to do all of the pre-work because you can't do it all. Future proof is not a thing, even though I hear that in the business context. And I think we can, make efforts and get close. And I'm not saying that this is an abandonment of some careful thought, but part of that care is just being there, right? And moving forward, even with the fear.
Right. Next question. It seems like there's tension between no failure, only learning, and assume success. How do these tenets coexist?
Excellent, excellent question. Thank you so much for offering that. I, yeah, I'm absolutely committed to that idea of never a failure, always a lesson, right? There's always going to be something to learn from it. Now, you may need some recovery time. There might be some bruises to tend. That recovery time varies in how long it takes for you and for the community involved. This is why resilience and transformative justice are also part of this set of strategies. The tension of kind of working through, well, sorry, let me back up. I think what we have here, if we've got lessons, then we have things that we can look at, that we can, if we're going to define success, we have things that we can look at and we can kind of bright side, right? Like, oh, this was successful. The fact that we actually did this, the fact that one person came, the fact that, we actually made this connection. We can mark those as successes, but we can also, we want to think about how to make this ongoing, right? So again, if you're stressing the iterative, then you want to be open to the possibility that there's going to be a do-over. There's going to be another version of this. It might not be the same thing. It might be a little bit different, but there's some more movement, right? There's some more movement to happen because there's always movement, because there's always change. And so I think that's one of the ways to navigate failure and success within the work that we're doing and with the teams that we have. Sort of recognizing that we've done some things really well, and there's room for doing things differently, right? And I tend to emphasize different over better because I don't really know, like I get uncomfortable sometimes with how better is presented to me, and perfect doesn't exist. And so as much as I'll say that as a filler word, it's not real. And so, because we're human and we're not perfect. So so I would recommend just sitting with those lessons and allotting, like assuming that, there's positives and negatives, both, and we can learn from both of those things. So how do we celebrate the wins, and how do we prepare for the next phase so that we can make a change?
Great, thank you. Let's see. So, iterative, fractal, nonlinear, independent, etc. I know what these words mean, but this all sounds very abstract and theoretical, even with the NYU example. This honestly appears to be a reshuffling and re-representation of ideas that have been around for a long time. Emergent strategies, what am I missing?
It's great. You're not really missing anything, and you're tapping into systems that have long been in existence. So I no quarrel. It's really super to be able to identify that this is part of a historic and long-standing set of traditions. Adrienne Marie Brown would argue this is ancient. These are ancient wisdoms, right? And in 2017, she offered them as her expression because she was seeing that this was an effective way of coalescing the ideas and experiences that she was having at the movement level. What I am suggesting also is that, oh, we do this, right? This is part of our lives, part of our work lives. So I definitely want to suggest that any novelty in this presentation depends on its ancient elements, right? Like today is a new day. Today is a new moment for us to think through some of these ideas. And these are really old ideas. And remixing is pretty fun. So I'm not, like I think that's really great too. I think that the exercise of us reflecting on emergent strategy and the concepts that work within them can give rise to like this can be inspiring, right? So if these really old, easily accessible concepts can be accessed and retold, um, and explored, then what other concepts can be, right? Like that's part of the conversation. Like we all have this really incredible set of knowledge and wisdom available to us that we can use in our relationships. I think the relational part is really important. There are a lot of places in library work where our work is very transactional. And so I would argue that emergent strategy very much centers this notion of relationality and gives us some ways to bolster and encourage our efforts toward more relationship.
Awesome, thank you. Can emergent strategy be used to counteract the very individualistic nature of academic librarianship? Thinking about how tenure and promotion processes can be very focused on individual work, individual research, individual contribution to service with little wiggle room.
That is a really important observation to make within, especially for those of us who are obligated within library settings to do the typical academic scene, which is very individualistic, and it's only within a certain element of academia, right? Because I think we find in STEM fields there is more like kind of sort of what you might call natural or foundational collaboration, right? A lab doesn't operate by itself. It's no one person can't do that work. And so I think in areas of the social sciences and certainly in areas of the humanities, we are growing more toward that, that work of collaboration. So, but what I would encourage, and I think that there's space within emergent strategies, right? The elements of emergent strategies to do this is there's a kind of balance and interplay between the collaborative work that happens and then the individual contributions. And so one thing that I would kind of hold to or like sort of point to is thinking about the slide that's on the screen right now. That little light bulb that says creating, what are your group's unique gifts? So Unique's doing a lot of work there, right? Unique is opening up the space for that individual contribution, for those singular lights to shine within this larger constellation that's so bright. And so I would say that yes, there is a bit of a tension. It is some of the work that has to happen with humans in relationship. And so within libraries, I think we have to hold that tension. I think that as we do that work, operating against these larger hierarchical structures, tenure is an incredibly difficult hierarchical structure to navigate and manage. I think that's the space where you're making your best effort to advocate that the communal gesture is as important as the individualistic gesture, and you show up too, right, as the individual in that communal space. Um, and it's also a moment to lean on the people who support you. And so where throughout the tenure process, where there are spaces for your colleagues to weigh in, again, on the importance of collaboration and your individual contribution, that I think will all together, right? Like it's all it's all working together to help us navigate that very difficult space. And so, again, a lot of words to sum up. The individual and the community do work together. The one person sparks, the whole thing illuminates. And drawing on the people who can advocate for us, who can support us, who can recommend us, can further that conversation and further that display to that tenure review committee.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So what suggestions do you have for middle managers or leaders without positional power who don't have support from above or below to implement ES?
Well, one thing so I would probably offer two moves. The first move is, what power do you have? It's a question. And then I would encourage you to just sort of sit with that question, right? Like, is there space? Is there breathing space, right? Even in the small, I mean, I started this conversation going back to enslavement, right? And one of the most important and moving elements of Accounting for Slavery book, Rosenthal's book, is the fact that the enslaved people had incredible ways of resisting the conditions of their labor. And so I'm not making an equation here. So please don't take it that way. But I just want to say that the first question is, do we really, are we really stuck in a place where we can't move? Or is there a little bit of space for a little bit of movement, right? And then the other thing that I would encourage is to think about one of the, this whole conversation is about potentially operationalizing emergent strategy, which I don't know if Adrienne Maree Brown would appreciate. I certainly would not expect movement workers to want to see a co-optation of this. I presented in, it's a philosophy, it's a way of thinking, and I think we can all access that way of thinking. And it's through that small change that we can affect larger changes. And so I would encourage people in positions where they feel like there's not a lot of movement, to kind of sit with it and really see if there's some space to find more ease and comfort. And then the other thing that I would encourage is the possibility that these are mindsets, in as much as they are steps toward actual action and actual behavior, right? Changed behavior. And so it is possible that even a shift in mindset will allow for someone in this position, for coworkers to kind of find a little more ease, to find each other and build more relationships.
So thank you. I'm curious about the concept of slow librarianship. If you have some examples of how that concept shows up in your work, I'd be interested to hear them. It sounds like a useful concept.
Yes. That slow librarianship, and I am also just kind of learning about that. There have been other conferences and other attention. You can search for that term, and you'll get some really important hits. But as I understand it, it is also the privileging of relationships. It is the de-emphasis of, on productivity as a practice, and more about deep, meaningful relationships that can be built between coworkers and between patrons. Um, and sort of moving in that direction. You might think about the slow food movement. Slow librarianship borrows as a term from the slow food movement, where again it's about the sort of meaning over the mass production. And I will try with the slides. I saw someone asked about the slides, and I will absolutely be sharing them. I'll try to add a couple of quick references. I do actually have some references that I can put in there for you.
Thank you. I believe we have time. Yeah, one more question. Can you give examples of foundational values and actions around which you've seen teams coalesce?
Great. Okay. Foundational values and actions. Um, I have so one instance that I've seen, we've had some really I work with a project at NYU, dual degree LIS program with Long Island University, and we had our reference services team come in and make a presentation about their work, and I just can continue to be really blown away with how they articulate their understanding of transformative justice and how they weave that into their day-to-day interactions with patrons. So really respecting the wisdom and presence of the people who come to the desk or ask a librarian chat. Deep respect for, and no judgment, right? Like deep respect for what people are showing up with, and really making efforts to support them in their knowledge journey. I think that, and that is borne out from my understanding of that team's good work together to figure out what it is that they value and hold dear, and then to infuse that through their work life.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for this wonderful presentation. It was a pleasure to have you with us. So
Thank
before we close this session, I would like to point out the evaluation survey that is available for you to complete. I'm certain that Roxane would be very much appreciative of your feedback. You can find a link to the evaluation in Sched. It's labeled feedback survey and it's directly above the session description. Thank you all for attending. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. Our next session is the conference closing and keynote, Bold Ideas and Concrete Solutions for Caregivers at Work, starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Central. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. If you have any questions, please be in touch. Have a good afternoon.